Well, friends, we are going to go ahead and start, and I want to formally welcome you to our, wait for it, the 74th online gathering for congregational leaders across the country. This monthly gathering is called Courageous Leadership, and it's sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jill Beverlin. I am the coordinator of coaching for the ELCA, and I'm one of your facilitators today. And I already have to correct myself. It's not monthly, it's weekly. We've gone back to weekly. So remember that, friends. Come again next week. So friends, as we gather, I want to remind you that we are creating and holding a safe and brave space in these gatherings, which are for you to bring the truth of who you are and how you're doing. These conversations are an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. So friends, again, happy Epiphany. I do hope that you are seeing and experiencing the light and love of Jesus moving boldly in, through, and around you this season. Thank you for engaging our opening question today. And again, we so appreciate that you're here, and we are extra excited to welcome to our space, ELCA's Director of Young Adult Ministries, Daniel Kirschbaum, and our friend and colleague, Sarah Weaver, who is the Coordinator of Special Projects for ELCA's Young Adult Ministries. So Daniel and Sarah, the floor is yours. Welcome to our space.
Thanks, Jill. It's good to be here. Always enjoyable to partner with ELCA Coaching. And I have not been a part of all 74 of these gatherings, but I think this is number 3 for me. So it's fun to get to jump in and join when we can. Jenna is also hanging out in our space observing, and she can wave or not wave if she wants to, but she's also on the ELCA Young Adult Coaching team supporting her colleagues as they share with you today. So appreciate that support, Jenna. We're going to open with some devotion time in the form of meditation, and then we'll also share with you a little bit about young adult ministry, how to engage young adults in your local spaces as leaders, what that looks like on the church-wide level and what that can look like in your local spaces, and then give us a chance to chat about that a little bit as well. We're going to dive into a meditation of the body. Whenever I lead spaces of meditation, whether that's new for you or something you're familiar with, I'll do a short preamble to welcome us in. A common thing I hear from folks who don't regularly meditate or for whom meditation is new is that it's too hard, or they can't do it, or they feel like they'll be distracted, or focusing is difficult. And those are really real concerns, because the average time right now, folks in America are silent or still without having some sort of stimulus other than sleeping is 1 minute max. That's the average time. It's absolutely wild. So I hope you get more than that regularly, but we're going to do 5 minutes, which isn't outlandish, but for most of us feels longer than 5 minutes because we're not in that practice regularly. So the practice of meditation is really a practice of bringing our attention back to what we're supposed to focus on. We're under no illusion that we're going to be focused on something for 5 minutes straight. Unless you're a regularly practicing meditator, that's going to be very difficult. And even our folks who practice meditation for hours at a time really successfully are just like a light bulb. So like a fluorescent light bulb, when you turn it on and it flickers on and off, what's happening is that light bulb is flickering always, but it's flickering so fast that you can't see it flickering. So at the beginning, it does that flicker, and then it's always flickering. It's just flickering so fast that it looks like it's constantly on. So our practice in meditation, that we always call practice because it's never perfect, is just constantly returning. And then hopefully we're at a point where we're like that light bulb, we return so fast that it feels like we're always paying attention. So we're going to pay attention to our body today. So I'm going to invite you to be in a space that feels comfortable. Folks often lie down when they meditate, but that's not actually the best position recommended, because it can be easy for us to fall asleep. And if we do, that's okay. It means our body needs rest. But I'm going to invite you to sit up in your chair, to try to keep your back as straight up and down as possible, to bring attention to your spine, holding your weight and holding yourself up. If possible, to have your feet flat on the floor, depending on where you're sitting. And then I'm going to invite you to have your hands in your lap, palms up, if that's comfortable. If that feels weird or awkward, feel free to be in a space that feels comfortable. We want our bodies more alert than we want them relaxed. So we want to be engaging and aware of our bodies rather than kind of just slumped and relaxed, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to invite you to close your eyes as you're comfortable. You're welcome to turn off your video if it's weird for you to have your video on, but your eyes closed. But that's totally up to you. We're going to start by focusing on our breath. And we'll start with a few seconds of silence. So you'll hear that, and then I'll invite you to bring your attention where we're going to go. I invite you to bring attention to your breathing, taking a deep breath in, being witness to the way it fills your lungs and your belly, breathing out slowly, feeling the rush of air on your lips. Our bodies are gifts from God, opportunities for ministry and joy, and shelters through storms of life. We're going to begin by bringing a gentle awareness to your body. We're going to start at our scalp. Notice the sensation. What does the top of your head feel like? Going to bring warm attention to your forehead and your temple, into your face, your eyes, ears, cheeks, nose, your mouth. Is there tension there? If there's tension or tightness, I'm going to invite you to refrain from judgment of that tension and just simply notice it in this moment. We're going to bring attention to our neck and to our shoulders, to any weight we might be carrying there. We'll move to our chest, feeling it rise and fall with our breath. Feel the complex sensation of your hands and your fingers. What does the top of your finger pad feel like when it's not touching anything? What sensation do you witness in your palms? If your mind is wandering, I invite you to come back to bring attention to your hands where we're at together. And bring attention back with no judgment, just noticing that your mind drifted. It's okay. Feel your lower back and your tummy. What do you carry there? Do you feel full? Do you feel discomfort? Bring attention to your buttocks on your chair or the floor. Notice how your legs feel. Don't make a judgment or a plan of action to improve or to change what you're feeling. We're just noticing. I'm going to invite you to bring a warm curiosity to your feet. What do the bottoms of your feet feel like? What sensations are there? Where have those feet brought you? If you don't have some of the body parts we've mentioned, or you don't have feeling in those body parts, that represents the diversity of who we are as God's people. Bring attention where it feels most comfortable. We're going to take a moment to zoom out and bring a curiosity to our body as a whole being. Feel the existence living in this body, a child of God body, a body of sensations. Bring a kind awareness. What is this body of sensations? What is this body from the inside out? Bring attention to your eyes. Experience what it's like to see the back of your eyelids in darkness, or to feel what your eyeballs feel like. And when you're ready, on your own time, feel free to slowly open those eyes. Take notice of the colors and the shapes around you. Come back to our community space. You're welcome to turn your video on if you're interested in that. Love to see your face, but of course it's not required. And receive a few words from our scriptures. The first from Psalm 139. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. From 1 Kings, we hear the command to go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is going to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks into pieces before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire this time. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. From Psalm 46:10, be still, know that I am God. I'm exalted among the nations. And lastly, from Romans, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we don't know how to pray as we ought to, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words, and God, who searches the heart, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. Please pray with me. Awesome Creator, we thank you for the physical manifestation that we are, the ways that we are called to be your hands and feet in the world, your bodies in the world. God, we thank you that you're a God of embodiment, a God of an incarnational form that has been physically present and continues to be. In your name we pray, amen. Friends, I'm going to share my screen, so be patient with me as I share the right one here. There we go. And I'm going to bring up your wonderful faces. So give me one more moment. We'll do a quick bit of introduction of who the Young Adult Ministry team is. We often use the tagline, "You are not alone." It's important for our young adults in this church and in this world to hear that over and over again, because young adulthood is an isolating time, often removed from our typical family units and out in the world on a journey to find what community looks like for us. And just as you know, as we move through this, young adult as defined by the ELCA Constitution is 18 to 30. We push on that a little bit as the program team tasked with ministering to young adults, and we define it as 18 to 35. That 18 to 30 really comes from a thinking or understanding that by 30, folks have settled down and are in a nuclear family setting, and we know that not to be true, and not to be true past 35 too, but much farther, and we would just be adult ministry, which would be fine, but currently not our call. And it also matches with the Lutheran World Federation's understanding of what youth is. They use the word youth for young adults, and that's 18 to 35 for them as well. We have some folks with us who can introduce themselves, but a short introduction of myself and those who aren't here yet. Like Jill said, my name is Daniel Kirschbaum. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. If it's new for you to see multiple pronouns on someone's screen, that means that you can use he, him pronouns or they, them, their pronouns for me. And both of those feel comfortable and safe. And I serve as the program director for Young Adult Ministry. Dan Byrne, who's the other Dan on the screen on the far left, serves as the Young Adult and Global Mission Program Coordinator. That's what that fun YAGM stands for, if that's new for you. And then May Helen Jackson, just to the right of Dan, serves as our outreach and placement manager for Young Adult Ministry. And so that's a fancy way to say May Helen works on recruitment and asking the question, who's not here yet? So for a lot of folks, that's people who are just turning 18 and moving into young adulthood. But for a good number of folks, especially in the ELCA, that's folks we as the ELCA haven't done the best job of inviting into our spaces. Right now, focusing specifically on folks with diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, queer folks, and folks with disabilities. And Jenna and Sarah, if you'd like to introduce yourselves. Jenna, if you don't turn on your video, I'll just introduce you for you because you're here to support, not to present, and I won't put you on the spot that way. But Sarah, take it away.
Great. Yes, I'm Sarah Weaver. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Special Projects Coordinator for ELCA Young Adults. So that means I get to work on new projects and programs for the young adults in our network. Right now, working on a couple things that we'll talk about them later as well. But I also get to partner with ELCA Coaching, which is very exciting because we are looking to connect coaches with young adults in various programs that are already ongoing for young adults, and also provide opportunities for young adults to become coaches as well. Yeah, it's basically what I do. Jenna, if you're...
Yeah. Jenna Lazat, she, her, hers. My cat's name is Oliver Jill, and he is a frequent helper and coworker. I am the network and alumni engagement manager for Young Adult Ministry, and so I work a lot with both alumni of young adult programs and networking and getting them plugged back into different opportunities within Young Adult Ministry, as well as just working with our partners. Pretty much any program or ministry that touches young adults in some form I work with, and yeah, networking. So that's me.
We'll share contact information later. If you heard Jenna talk and say she works with all things that touch young adults, and your stuff touches young adults and you're not in contact with Jenna and you're like, what the heck? We'll make sure that's available to you a little bit later. If you're looking at this screen and thinking, wow, 5 people relating to young adults, that seems like so many. It is so many, and it's new. We became a 5-person team this year for the first time. Previously, the YAGM team kind of did their own thing, and there was 1 person dedicated to young adult ministry at large at our churchwide office. And so this is new to have kind of an intentional strategic team approaching different aspects of young adult ministry. Sarah's position specifically, I want to just lift up as something that we've tried to be really intentional about. And I invite people to consider ways of doing this, which is to plan for what's not happening yet. And a huge reason behind that is the learning we had through the pandemic, that we don't know what's happening tomorrow. And we need to be equipped and have the capacity to handle that. And I think often we put ourselves in a scarcity mindset in our church planning where we think we can barely even keep up with what's already going on. And so this is an attempt to have a real structural way to think about what could be, rather than just keeping up with all the goings-on of where we're at. We want to walk through a couple programs that Young Adult Ministry touches and interacts with. And so we just want to lift up a few of those. Our time today is going to be sharing with you what we do, sharing a little bit of the Gen Z research that is new, which doesn't cover all of our young adults, but covers our up and coming young adults. And then share a little bit of what works well when creating young adult ministry or engaging young adults. And then we'll invite us into the practice of thinking about young adult ministry or young adult leaders in our own context as well. So Sarah, if you want to start us off, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah. So first, we're going to talk about Abide and Passage. Abide is a digital church, basically, is how I would describe it. It's a network, a community of young adults who have met during the pandemic. Abide started basically right when the pandemic started. I got home from my Yagam year. I was sent home early because of the pandemic, and then jumped right onto Abide because it was meant to be a space for young adults to meet together in small groups wherever they were in the United States and meet every week about different topics. There were videos that came out and are still coming out as well. We'll have Abide in Spring will be next this coming spring as well. So we talked about things such as abide in love, abide in creation, and abide in anger, abide in everything, any topic you can think of. We've talked about it. So it's just a really great way that we've continued that network of young adults, especially young adults who haven't necessarily been a part of a congregation, who aren't currently a part of a congregation, such as myself, when I was in Abide as well. So it was a way for me to connect with those other young adults.
Absolutely. And it's not meant to replace a congregation by any means, but it certainly is community for folks who feel pretty distant or don't have a congregation nearby them because it happens online. And those happen in seasons, and folks can bring a group or find a group to be a part of. Passage is really similar to Abide, but it happens in the summer, and it's specifically for folks who are graduating high school, moving into young adulthood, and looking for ways to connect. But it really specifically addresses concerns like finding community, what am I doing next, questions that folks graduating high school and moving out of what is a known community for them might be experiencing. A couple others, we have our engagement with our Peace Not Walls partners, who are folks who work with our Palestinian church neighbors. And so Advent Pilgrimage in Palestine happens every Advent. So if you haven't participated in that before, keep an eye out for it. It's another digital ministry to connect with and be a part of. World Hunger Fellows, we have young adults positioned in different advocacy offices around the US who get to help with all kinds of advocacy issues. They specifically are hired to focus on hunger, but often participate in a lot of other advocacy. So young adults are engaged in some of those pieces as well. And then we engage in a couple different ways with the youth gathering. So you'll see the Boundless logo up there. Both young adults can be servant learning companions at the youth gathering, or volunteers or chaperones for youth groups. And also we get to introduce ourselves to the youth who are there at the Interactive Learning Space and Center as well. So we get to partner with those folks.
And then we also have, of course, Lutheran Outdoor Ministries, which is our camps and retreat centers across the United States. And there's countless opportunities for young adults to be a part of outdoor ministry there. They can be counselors during the summer, other supporting staff during summer, leadership staff. And there's also opportunities for internships and to work as retreat staff when summer camp is not happening. You can work for do a year-long internship if you are in a space where you're not quite ready to do a full-time job, that provides lots of learning opportunities for them. And also there are so many young adults in full-time ministry positions and LOM sites, which is amazing. We also have YAGM, which again is Young Adults in Global Mission. It is a 1-year long service opportunity in a different country. There's opportunities to work in so many different places. Again, it kind of depends on whichever country that you're placed in. For example, I went to Senegal, which is in West Africa, and I worked in the Lutheran Church of Senegal in music and liturgy, and people will work in churches or in schools or they'll work with immigrants or migrants. There's a lot of opportunities for them there. But it's a great place to learn and to connect with a community that you may not be familiar with, and also to grow with your cohort of people that you get to be YAGMs with as you grow together throughout your year of service. Then we have No Plastics for Lent, which is another digital ministry that we do during Lent, during those 6 weeks, to focus on creation care and climate justice, and talking about the different ways that climate justice intersects with other forms of justice. And so that will be happening when Lent is coming, which I think is in March. Did you talk about Lutheran Campus Ministry? I can't remember.
I didn't, but I will.
Okay.
Lutheran Campus Ministry is pretty self-explanatory, but we partner with folks on ELCA college campuses, but also a lot of our public schools have a Lutheran Campus Ministry nearby, or a campus ministry that serves a lot of schools in that city or area, and get to accompany both the leaders of those ministries and the students of those ministries as they're in school time. We have a lot of those folks are young adults, as they're like 18 to 22, 23-year-old college students, but we also have grad students and professors and things that engage in those ministries that we get to partner with as well. I'll touch briefly on Lutheran Volunteer Corps and Urban Servant Corps are both opportunities to have a kind of a domestic service year program. Domestic fellowship, which Sarah will talk about, is similar, except less focused on service and more focused on a leadership work opportunity rather than specifically a service opportunity. LVC is in a lot of different cities, and Urban Servant Corps is specifically based in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, so I'll just start from the top here then. ELCA Coaching, which most of you are probably familiar with. Jill and Jason are. So ELCA Young Adults is going to be partnering with Coaching to, like I mentioned before, provide coaches for young adults in various programs. We talked about the Hunger Fellows program earlier, and right now we have a couple of coaches who are connecting with the Hunger Fellows, who are young adults, to be with them. And it's a way for ELCA Young Adults to support those coaches and support the young adults so that they can be a part of this amazing coaching ministry that is happening. And then also we'll provide training for some coaches who are young adults so that they can have that opportunity as well. And I'm just excited. We've just begun this process of working with coaching, and I'm just very excited to see where this is going to go. And then domestic fellowship program as well. Daniel mentioned it is a domestic not so much service opportunity, but job opportunity for young adults. So it provides an opportunity for them to work at an organization or one of our partner organizations through the ELCA that maybe can't support a full-time staff member. And the ELCA Young Adults is going to help offset those costs so that they are able to put a person on their full-time staff, maybe for a year or maybe for longer. It just depends on what the program needs. Yeah, so it's a way for our young adults to work with those partners and also be paid a full salary and have like benefits and all of that great stuff that comes with having a full-time job. And that's going to be domestic again. So here in the United States, sort of as it's similar to YAGM or LVC or USC, as you see below, but we're focusing here in the United States with our neighbors before we're going to go out and help the rest of the world.
Yeah, awesome. And then the last piece you see here is Discernment Retreats. Typically twice a year. This year it's just going to happen once, hopefully in person. We shall see. We occasionally host Discernment Retreats, and this is an opportunity for young adults discerning anything, not just a call to ministry. Often we use discernment when we talk about a call to candidacy or full-time ministry, but this discernment retreat is for folks discerning what their next job is or what this next step might look like for them. But it's a rare opportunity when we get to gather 50 young adults together to just be ministered to for a weekend. And so it's a pretty neat space. It was a pretty formative time in my introduction to young adult ministry. And it's a beautiful weekend. And so as those come up, and if you see them come up and want to connect young folks to them, it's an impactful time I'd recommend. We have a couple networks, and Jenna is still on the call. Her email's here. Jenna, if you want to drop your email in the chat too, that would be good. But we have 3 kind of networks that are in formation. These are brand new and are just kind of starting. But the partner network is a network of all of the folks you just saw as leaders partnering together as the folks we work with related to young adults, helping us dream how we might connect better together and engage with one another. And the Synod Network is a network of a representative from each synod who's kind of like leading the charge on young adult ministry in that synod. If you're like, I wonder who that person is in my synod, it's possible we don't have someone from your synod yet, although I think we have most of them covered, and Jenna can connect you with that person if you're curious if your synod has one yet or not. And the steering committee is a committee of 15 young adults who confirmed just this week that they would be on this committee. So applications were open for the last month and a half, and members of the steering committee applied. We're a part of a process. We had over 60 young adults apply to be on the steering committee to help the young adult ministry team at the churchwide office kind of have broader voice when thinking about overall strategy for young adults. This steering committee will have a new set of 6 join it every 6 months. So 15 people at a time, or 7.5, 6.5, I don't know, whatever the number is, will rotate on and off every 6 months. So there'll be new opportunity for folks if you're like, oh, I have an awesome person who could be on that committee, but they didn't see anything about it or weren't a part of it this time around. There's deep intention to have representation of the diverse body of Christ in the steering committee. In this first round, out of our 15 folks, we have only 6 of those folks are white. The rest represent the rest of the diversity of our church. 10 of those 15 folks identify in the queer community in some capacity. 7 of them have a disability of some kind. We have non-binary folks and folks identifying as cis women and men. So it represents a large diversity of what this church looks like, and we're excited to have those voices direct what young adult ministry looks like and move us in cool directions. So if you're curious about any of those network opportunities or feel like you know someone who should be a part of it or you'd like to be a part of one of those, Jenna is the person who stewards all of those networks for us, and she is beyond incredible at her job. So we're pretty lucky. We're going to jump into some Gen Z just updates. I'll try to go through this pretty quickly, but I just want you to have an idea of who's coming. So our Gen Z folks right now are the age range between like 12, 13-ish. That number is like a little adjustable depending on who you're listening to as far as what Gen Z means, till up to about 25 right now. I'm like glitching on my screen, so if you can't hear me, please tell me. My video is being weird, but if you can hear my audio, great. So that's who Gen Z is. So it's kind of our incoming young adults and outgoing youth and current youth. A few just kind of tidbits. They're our largest and most diverse generation that we have. So they have become the largest generation. They've surpassed our baby boomers, and they by far are the most diverse when it comes to gender and sexuality and race and ethnicity. They're asking questions like, who am I? Where do I fit in? What difference do I make? They are pretty largely not churched as far as percentages go. It doesn't mean there aren't Gen Z people in churches, but as a generation, they're not churched, but they are very engaged and invested in spiritual practice. So they're seeking and looking and are a part of engaging that part of their identity. But as far as churched in this instance means institutional church. And so that's informative to us as we think about how we're engaging folks. It probably doesn't look like sitting in pews once a week. They are a generation of positive pessimism. They are very real and they see through baloney very quickly. So they absolutely will call out where resources are coming from and how people are using funding and energy and time. And does it actually reflect the values that they're looking for? One of those values is climate justice. Our Innovation Home area, as a part of the churchwide office, did a preliminary research project on Gen Z folks, and those folks were asked to, like, if they could pick an issue to address first that was most important to them across identities, meaning Gen Z folks of multiple races and ethnicities and genders and sexualities and income levels all said that climate justice over and above was something that they'd address first. So I think sometimes we are trying to catch up on a lot of justice issues, and they are like, we're done with all that. Maybe not done, they care about it, but it is not our highest priority right now. It's important that we're focusing on climate justice first and foremost. They are a digital native generation, so they spend a ton of time on their phone. Now, I think it's often something we think that this is a terrible thing. I think it's important that we take breaks. It's good for our eyes, but there's a lot of positive things that are happening for Gen Z folks as they're connecting with one another. They are a more global community than any generation has ever been, because they have connection and information from around the world at the touch of their fingertips, and they're used to accessing it. Another piece to note here is that while they're on their screens, they don't primarily feel like they're experiencing bullying and harassment or isolation like we often saw in our millennial generation, but they're experiencing connection. They're feeling accepted and encouraged and informed in those digital spaces. Now, you will see that when they surpass the average amount of screen time, you start to see more negative feelings. So there is everything in moderation tone to this as well, that regular engagement with screen time brings some positive things, and over engagement with screen time can have some negative things accompany it. So that's here. The higher we're on screen time, the more likely we get reports of isolation, insecurity, and self-criticism. So I want to share a couple tidbits about what works well when forming young adult ministries. So this comes from our own team's experience, and then our experience in working with our partners, as well as influenced by our research on Gen Z and millennial folks. So I'm going to talk about each one really briefly for us, but first and foremost, that we honor the prophetic leadership of young people. I had a pastor ask me about starting a young adult ministry recently in an urban area, and I asked him what young adults were on the leadership team for this young adult ministry. And he was like, oh, our church staff is going to lead it. And I said, that's awesome. Which one of your church staff are young adults? And none of them were. So I would I would just outright say, not even an opinion, I'm going to say it is my highest recommendation and best practice that you don't have a young adult ministry if you don't have young adults in the leadership of your young adult ministry. Because the reality is young adults are adults. So they're capable of being leaders, more than capable of being leaders of their ministries. There can be help and support and influence from other folks of all ages, but young adults need to be at the helm of whatever young adult ministry is happening. Being resourced is certainly helpful and paid for that time as well. They're interested in what's happening right now. Young adults are interested in relevant topics like racial justice and queer liberation and climate justice. And so gathering to talk about faith in abstract concepts instead of applicable real life situations is less appealing to young adults. Their spirituality matters to them, but it's an applied spirituality that is lived out in the way that, quite frankly, we're really called to be doing. They want relevant gospel-centered content, and that means that relevant right now content is gospel-centered. So they don't just want justice stuff because it's justice stuff. It's important that it's connected to who we are as the people of God. That right now piece is also, this is the right now of the church. We often hear as young adult ministry, like, oh, your job is really important because you work with the future of our church. And I think that's meant to land really well, but it lands for young adults pretty frustratingly because we aren't the future of the church. We currently exist in the church. We are the present. We've been a part of the past, and we will continue to be the church in the future. By and for programming, meaning that any programming development as far as content is has influence from diverse young adult voices influencing it. Abide, which was mentioned earlier, which again happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, happened because young adults said this is important and these topics matter to us. Equity-based design is something we practice as a young adult ministry team, which means that any program we design has folks from diverse backgrounds as a part of the planning process. It is much harder to bake diversity into a program after it's existed for 30 years, and power likes to perpetuate power, meaning there's not a lot of room for diversity to jump into. Equity-based design says it's best practice for the folks who you're hoping to reflect in the program to be a part of the planning of the program from the beginning. Young adults want connection and are relational. So staring straight ahead in stadium style or auditorium style seating like pews often are, isn't an effective way of feeling connection in a large group space. Circular spaces and facing one another or being at tables like dinner, church, and conversation based is more intriguing. So 9 times out of 10, a young adult is going to be more interested in the fact they got to have a conversation with their neighbor than they are in an 8-minute message that was delivered to them. Capacity versus audience. So you heard a lot of the programs we shared where young adults have leadership opportunities. Super awesome, really important. We like equipping young adults with concrete skills that they can use. But often this church has viewed young adults as its like internship workforce. So, right, like if you think young adults have been the camp counselors, they've been the service people, they've been called to be the chaperones for youth groups, which is all positive and helpful, and young adults do appreciate service as a value. But we have very few opportunities in this church where young adults are ministered to, and the space is created for them to experience a ministry program. And so taking that ratio into account as you're thinking about young adult ministry in your own context is important. As a young adult ministry team at the churchwide office, we specifically focus on anti-racism and queer liberation in all that we do. And what that means is that we have young adults of color and queer young adults in leadership opportunities, that our content has those things considered in it, and that we're not afraid to talk about those topics. I would say largely young adults aren't, largely, not everybody, but not interested in being a part of a church that's not actively anti-racist and actively doing queer liberation work in the ELCA. And so there aren't a lot of spaces in the ELCA where we can concretely say, like, this program specifically has these 2 values that we commit to. And so for us as young adult ministry, it's important that we stay committed to those things. Third spaces in regional work is a nod and an invitation. So it's great that we have all these national programs, but something that happens is what I call the Nadia Bowles-Weber effect of this church. And I will say it loud and clear, which is that we have young adults who see Nadia Bowles-Weber as a New York Times bestselling author and interact with her or another aspect of our church on a national level or a regional level that is inviting, that matches their values, that's living out church in a way that is impactful for them. And then they move to a different aspect or different region of the ELCA and engage with an ELCA church and don't find that same connection. That's okay. Every place has different cultures and different capacities and are in different places. It's not a bad thing, but it leaves young adults feeling like they don't have a place to plug in a lot of our spaces in the ELCA. And so something we're working with synods and urban regions and even large rural regions that can connect together is how they might work together rather than trying to do young adult ministry on their own, to connect with other churches in their area or ministry programs in their area, like camps or campus ministries, to create some third spaces that aren't congregations or the national level, but are some regional spaces for young adults to connect once a month, twice a month. Minneapolis has a program called Gather, and that has started in Cincinnati, is beginning in Denver and Colorado Springs. They're popping up as regular kind of once a week, month or twice a month gatherings for young adults to connect with one another, but still be engaged in their local congregational context as well. And we hope to increase congregational capacity. That's the last piece here. I think it's a real question and a real challenge that not all congregations have the capacity to do young adult ministry well. Not just that they don't have the funds or the staff, but that the culture of that congregation isn't in a place where it's willing to shift or change. And my hope and prayer is that those congregations slowly move towards in a direction that they're able to embrace and welcome young adults well, in a way that doesn't feel like the young adult has to conform to the congregation to be a successful member of that ministry. And it's really challenging for church leaders to just make that change on a short, quick notice. And so that's why these regional spaces and opportunities are important, so we can gather young adults, and there's active ministries that are happening that we can learn from. Great. We're gonna move into some small group time. And Jill, how much time do we have for that? Or Jason, and what do our small groups look like? Not a lot. I see that. There's like 3 minutes. So sorry. We can just talk here. It's not a huge group. I don't know.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, we're only 17. So I think we just stay here.
Great. I'll invite Sarah to lead us through like a short intro to this, so you have time to think before we just invite you to react. And then we'll get to have some discussion.
Great. Yes, so some questions to leave you with. And of course, these aren't just here for this space, but I encourage you to take them with you when you leave here today, and continue to think about them as you're creating these spaces for young adults. I put them in the chat as well if you'd like to copy and paste them to anywhere, or want to just write them down somewhere. So I'll read them off and leave a little bit of just thinking space after each one, and then we can come back together for discussion. So name a young adult in your community that you can invite to the ELCA young adult programs and partnerships. So think of a specific young adults that you know in your community or in your programs or organization that you know who needs to be a part of these ministries that are happening, or can be a part of them, who's not already a part of the things that are going on. And then also, what specific programs would interest and be beneficial to the young adults in your community? What are the gifts that you receive from young adults? And how might you listen to young adults well? Like, we'll open it up to our discussion, I suppose. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or anyone else wanted to add before we talk?
I'd invite any reflections, any answers to the questions, or just reactions from our time together. I will just name a number one question I hear a lot ahead of time, which is, where are the young adults? How do I find them? How do I invite them? To which I'd say I'd invite you to find the young adults. I can help you answer that question. But I think often we're used to our typical ways of communicating, and that might need to change, right? Like email and Facebook aren't the main ways of communicating for young adults. Instagram, texting are a lot more helpful. And I had someone point out to me recently that, like, for example, if you have a camp nearby you, the young adults might view that as their primary ministry community once they've graduated high school and haven't found a church home. And so there might need to be some other ministries that are a space for you to connect with young adults. So I'll name that question up front. And if we have any other reflections, I'd invite those.
Danielle and Sarah, thank you for providing so much information and wisdom and insight. And so, and you've given us a really nice comprehensive view of where we're at today with young adult ministry, especially in the ELCA. So if you had to recommend one step that could be a powerful step, knowing that you've talked a lot about diversity, and our synods are very diverse, of course, in the ELCA. But if you had to pick one step, one faithful step that the people in this room could take, what would that step be?
Well, I would, it's kind of like a branch. So I have a yes, no question, and then a step depending on the answer to that question. The question would be, does a young adult ministry context exist nearby you? Is there already something happening? So if the answer is no to that, I'd invite you to meet with one partner to dream about what that could look like, or to find a stakeholder in young adult ministry nearby you, whether that's the Synod contact that Jenna can connect you with, or another ministry partner, staff member, because I think doing something by yourself is never that fun. And my recommendation would be that be a young adult. If there's not a context and you have no young adults around you, which I hope isn't the case, but if it is, then meet with somebody and try to network until you find one. The second response, if you're in the yes, a young adult ministry program and context exists, would be to meet with them and wonder how your ministry context might partner with them and support them in what they're doing. I think often we create new things instead of asking how Christ is present. And the young adult ministry in your context might not be, this is the real kicker, might not be an ELCA ministry that like formally happens. It might be, like a group of faithful young adults playing volleyball together once a week that you could minister, right? Like there are places where young adults are gathering that we often think that they're not interested in church stuff, so we're not going to go there. And there may be a way of introduction by just saying like, hey, can we do snacks for you guys once a week? Or, right, what does that look like?
I want to say one of the things that I really appreciated you saying is that even though we don't see the young adults in the pews, there is something else happening somewhere, and we just have to figure out where that is. We have a youth and family minister person or director in our church, and I know he's very, very active, but we never see those people in church. But now I'm okay with that after hearing you say that. Thank you.
Jill, that's an awesome reflection. I appreciate you naming that, because I think what we're used to for our way of measuring engagement is, are they in a pew and giving and taking communion, right? Like that's how even in the ELCA Constitution define like who votes at things. And so those systems of measure currently, right, like don't reflect how people are engaging, but they, right, like faithful engagement in deep relational ministry is happening. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm loving the comments coming into the chat, and I invite, if I could be so bold, Daniel and Sarah, to throw another question out there for people to respond to is, I'd love to hear more about what was helpful that our presenters shared today. There was just so much, and that the minute I couldn't believe where we were at on the clock when they were done presenting because I was so absorbed. But if you could name one or two things that were most helpful, that might also be helpful for Daniel and Sarah to hear as they continue to take their narrative forward in the ELCA.
Go for it, Libby. Good to see you.
I just wanted to say that of those questions that were read, I really appreciated the one that asked us to reflect on what gifts young adults give, because I had the opportunity the last 12 years to really be closely connected with our campus ministry in La Crosse, and the gift that I received over and over again, which really encourages me to continue finding opportunities to connect with young adults was acceptance. I mean, I just was like, I don't usually feel like, I mean, now that I'm in my mid 40s, I'm like, I clearly don't belong here. And yet, even though I had a role as a part of the Synod, I've just appreciated the acceptance that I've found. And it's just I just think the rest of the church has a ton to learn from young adults. And I do, and I'd love to see us get better at doing that. So thanks for just asking us to reflect on it.
I've recently, for a short time, been member of a congregation in Fort Wayne, and had the experience of hearing the pastor more than once when welcoming people to the congregation talk about the fact that the congregation expects new people to change the congregation. And this pastor has been working at developing that changeable culture of the congregation. And I think if more congregations could learn to do that, I think it'd be a good thing.
Danielle, I saw you making a statement, but you were muted, friend.
Just said absolutely.
Pastor David, please.
I was just, I heard, I'm sorry, I forgot the last person before, the brother that just spoke, mentioned about, being glad that the young adults are getting involved in some places. And I don't want to be bearer of bad news or anything like that, but in my experience in a lot of churches is that a lot of young adults try not to get involved because the adults don't want to change what's going on in the church. The older adults don't want what's going on to change. And the young adults are bringing too much change. And so we want the young adults, we want the young people in the church, but we don't want to do anything to change what we're doing to bring them. We're satisfied with them doing something outside of the church. And we should have a little more focus on bringing us all together in our worship and not just coming together in our worship just to worship the way we're used to worshiping. And I think that brings a lot of closed-mindedness. And a lot of our churches are hurting because we have either no or very few young adults. I have 2 young adults in my church for another 2 years. I have one teenager who's 14, and the rest are younger or older. And I'm one of the young people, and I'm 54. So, and I've been a youth pastor and been working with young adults most of my ministry. It takes the support of other people in the congregation to help out. Because as Daniel was saying earlier, I can't do it all myself. I was about to do some stuff and my young adults don't even want to do anything. And it's like, whoa, what's going on? So that's the hard part. And I like to hear what's going on. I've seen a lot of things. My wife is involved in church-wide with training some young adults in leadership. So it's I know it's happening, but we need to see more in our local congregations, and us as adults need to stop trying to stop getting in the way of what God wants to do. Thank you.
Pastor David, thank you for amplifying the messages that we've heard today. And I remember another gathering time where Pastor David said that God is doing a new thing. And I'm going to borrow those words again and just say that in the comments that I've heard today and the amazing presentation from Daniel and Sarah today, we are invited to hold space and to invite everyone in, the diversity of God, the body of Christ, and wait with great anticipation for what God is recreating. And so I'm so appreciative of your time today, of our presenters today. And please know that the work that you are doing is so valuable. Each of you are so loved, and you are an important part of the new creation that God is building here on earth. So with that, Daniel, I'm really going to put you on the spot and ask you if you would just like to say a final blessing on our group as we leave.
Yeah, I can do that. Friends, I thank you just for this time today and for your openness and listening ears, because that's what moves us forward. So as you go, may the Lord go with you. May God encourage you in your ministries and help you rest.
Thank you again, friends. Next week, we have the privilege of the Director of African Descent Ministries with us, Nicolette Penaranda. So we'll be here again, 1 to 2 o'clock. Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you then. God bless you.